Hello and welcome. We hope you will enjoy this webinar brought to you by the Pathways to Promotion Committee of the ASA Consulting Section. This and other webinars in our series can be found on the Consulting Section YouTube channel. Keep in touch by following us through our social media accounts. We wish you the best of success in your pathway to promotion.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the Perspectives for Staff Statisticians, Pathways to Promotion and ASA Statistical Section webinar, and we're really happy to have everybody here, and we're going to get started and have a really great session. We have two really great speakers today, and this webinar is also being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube page as well. So just to give a quick overview, as I've been kind of scrolling through these first set of slides, to just let people know about other ASA section on consulting activities. We have our Academic Statistics Consulting Center Hangout group that meets twice a month. There's also the Collaborative Healthcare Networking group that meets every other month, and then the Meetup for Statistical Consultants, which is monthly, and then our Pathways to Promotion committee as well also meets monthly. And so the contact information is here if you'd like to get in contact and joining those different activities. I also just like to mention that we have a new LinkedIn page and that we're also on Twitter as well. So if you look for ASA Statistical Consulting Section, you can find us on each of those social media platforms. So just to give a brief overview of the webinar that we'll be having today. So we're going to be starting with a brief introduction, and then at about 12:40 Eastern time, we're going to get into the speakers' presentations. They'll each be talking for a short time, and then we'll get into a panel discussion to address their questions from the audience. And then we're going to end our time, the last time about 1:35 Eastern to 2 p.m. Eastern with some breakout room sessions where you could talk to each of the speakers individually in a room. And then there's also going to be a networking room as well. So just to give a brief overview of the consulting section, we are really focused on fostering a community of statistical practitioners across diverse disciplines. We support ASA members by fostering a community that welcomes diverse viewpoints, promoting and nurturing career development, facilitating mentorship and sponsorship, and providing resources to achieve excellence in the practice of statistics, and also helping you establish your own statistical consulting practice. And so you can read more about us on our community and stat page. And then Maggie New is the chair, and so her email is there as well if you'd like to contact her for more information. Specifically, this webinar is put on by a subcommittee within the ASA Consulting Section, which is the Pathways to Promotion Committee. And our mission statement is to develop recommendations and tools to the advancement of non-tenure track collaborative academic statisticians, but also working, we've kind of expanded to include also tenure track and then also staff statisticians as well. So we've been a growing committee over the past year and a half or so, and there is planning stages for future webinars on negotiation skills. And if you're interested in joining, Margaret Stedman is the chair of the committee, and you can email her there. And so I would just like to introduce myself. I will be the MC of this webinar. And so my name is Charlotte Bolch, and I'm the manager of bioclinical statistics and an adjunct assistant professor at Midwestern University. I work on both the Arizona and the Illinois campuses. And this is a webinar that's really close to my heart because I've been navigating the field of a staff statistician. And so I'm at a university where there is limited promotional pathways available to me. I am the only statistician on both of those campuses. And so I've been really interested in learning more about how to navigate as a single kind of isolated statistician, and how to kind of also talk to HR and kind of figure out what do I need to be doing to kind of help my promotion packet and see what my career pathways are at my university as well. And so I am very excited to be here to lead this webinar, and we're going to get into the first kind of speaker. So just a few instructions. We would ask you to submit questions at any time during the presentation with the chat feature. We'll have this, as I had mentioned previously, the open Q&A session following the panel discussion. And then we'll have breakout rooms for discussions with the speakers later on. So please feel free to message your questions into the chat, and then we'll take those at the end. So I am going to be introducing first our first speaker, which is Heather Kopetskie, and she is the Director of Biostatistics at Rowe. And thank you very much, Heather, and I will stop sharing my slides and turn it over to you.
Let me share my screen. All right, can everyone see that? Perfect. Okay, so as she said, my name is Heather Kopetskie, and I am now the Senior Director of Biostatistics. So I myself got a promotion just in April. But I work at Rowe, and we're a contract research organization in Durham, North Carolina. And we're going to split up the talks today in that I'm really going to be discussing the skills for promotion and different promotion pathways. And then Sandy's going to discuss opportunities and strategies for advancement, especially in the academic setting. There we go. And so while I work in industry and not in an academic setting, the skills, the abilities, the distinctions for promotion are very similar, really for all statisticians, we hope. And so when you start off right out of school, I kind of consider you are in the learning stage. Your education isn't done just because you have your diploma. Spoiler alert, I still learn every single day. So you're learning about a lot of different things. You're learning about the company, its processes, environment, expectations. You're learning about the industry, common analysis methods, how to work with collaborators, the process for collecting data, processing that data, and then analyzing it. You're really focused on learning everything that's in that job description from beginning to end and how to do the specific tasks assigned to you, usually with the supervision of someone else. And hopefully you have a mentor to ensure you are learning the required skills, and then you continue learning to build on what you've already learned. And so once you have really the fundamentals of your job and you're starting to work more independently, that's the trigger for me to really start discussing a promotion. Essentially, you fully understand the basics of the process. You can perform everything independently on simple projects. You're still going to have questions, but they're going to be focused and well-defined questions. I also think it's very important to understand when you need to ask those questions because you're out of your depth. It's really important to bring those questions and not just try to figure it out. So as a manager, the transition point for me is when I have an individual who no longer needs me to say, here's the next step. And instead, the individual is coming to me and saying, hey, this is what's next. Do you want me to go ahead and do it? And so just to put sort of a time frame around this learning to this kind of independent stage where you know exactly what needs to be done next, I typically see this taking around 4 years. I've seen some people go much quicker and some people take longer. There's so many factors that go into this time frame, but I really just wanted to put some kind of time frame around it so the expectation isn't this is going to happen in 1 year, because it doesn't. I think there's so many aspects to our jobs that within a year, we probably don't even have the opportunity to tackle everything we're going to have to do in our jobs. So first stage, straight out of school, you're in that learning stage. Next, you go to independence. Well, what's the next step? And I'm calling the next step leadership, because it's not as clearly defined from a promotion standpoint. And leadership can take so many different forms, and it can be customized to your interests and strengths. So I chose just 3 images here to talk about, but there's so many different areas of leadership. And so you could be a leader in a specific subject area, so a subject matter expert. And this can be an expert internal to your organization, maybe external, but an expert on a topic. It could be a methodology such as Bayesian statistics. I work in clinical trials, so it could be complicated adaptive designs. It could be in a therapeutic area or like depression in clinical trials. It could be in genomics, RNA sequencing. There's so many different areas that you could be a subject matter expert on. The next one I have here is really business development. You are out there being a leader and bringing business into your company, whether it be writing grants and proposals, talking to new clients and selling your business. You need to be knowledgeable. You need to think quick on your feet, be adaptable to new types of work that are brought to you. Just because you've never done it before, how do you solve that problem? Business development is really important to a lot of companies because they need to bring work into the company. And this is really a place that you can be a leader in how do you drive the business forward. And then the last one, I really just have a picture of leader because you can just be a leader of complex, difficult projects, really large projects that have many moving parts, but then also a leader of people, both formally as a manager or informally. I feel like informal leadership is really important outside of just the management aspect. And so to me, leadership is the distinction for the next level of promotion. Like I said, it's not clear cut. You can't just go and say, hey, I'm doing this independently now. There's a lot more sort of documentation going into it. And Sandy will sort of talk about some of the strategies, especially once you get here. But to me, it's you've now transitioned to being a leader in an area and you can show this leadership. You are helping others in the business learn kind of how they're doing their jobs at a lower level. So when you think about leadership, I think you also need to think about what type of leadership do you want to kind of excel in. And so I'm going to talk about 3 common pathways this can take. All right, so the 3 pathways I'm going to talk about are technical expert, managerial, and then generalist. And knowing what interests you will help drive your conversations with your supervisor and really make sure the opportunities align with what you're interested in. I feel like it's really important that you choose to do something that makes you happy and interests you because it's good for you and the company when those align. And so just sort of as an example, when I was very early on in my career, I had someone tell me they thought I'd make a great principal investigator and I really should consider finishing my PhD. But I knew a PI wasn't the job I wanted to have. And so I needed to listen what is of interest to me instead of external pressures to figure out kind of which path I should take. And so I personally chose the generalist path. I never had any expectations to be a manager. So I would say now I probably fall in the generalist and the managerial bucket. So just because you choose one also doesn't mean you can't kind of move around. So I'm going to talk about each of the buckets really quickly. So I'm going to start with the generalist. And kind of this person knows a lot of things and is always interested in learning something new. And sometimes it's learning something just on the surface, so you know the method exists. You can talk at a high level with a client, and then you can go research it more or talk to others who are experts in this area. But you know a wide breadth of information about your specific industry. This doesn't mean you don't have technical expertise. It really just means you're sort of an expert on a lot of different topics. So it means you can be a leader in kind of a wide array of information and things that are coming into the company. So that's sort of what I call the generalist bucket. The next one's managerial. And I think this one's a little clearer in that you are managing individuals in the company. And I do think, though, this can look different in each company. So, you know, for example, me, the managerial, it's wider than just managing people. It's managing career progression, but also people's workloads forecasting hiring needs for the company, ensuring quality statistical deliverables, but also mentoring people. So a manager can be a lot of different things. And I think if this is the path you're going, having that conversation with your company to figure out, what does the management role look like here? What would be my responsibility? So you have a clear understanding. And management could just be, you're going to oversee 2 people, be their manager, mentor them, train them. And that's where that's a perfect fit for you. So just having that conversation about what does the managerial track look like. And then the last one's technical expert. And in my mind, this is very specialized expertise in a specific area. So, for example, analysis of genomics data. And if you go down this path, I recommend ensuring that the area of focus you're choosing is enough work to sustain, ensures that you are still marketable in case you have to move or leave, that expertise is marketable to other employers, and that it's in an area of need that will continue to be a need. And also really keeping an eye on the changing industry, the changing landscape, what do you need to keep current with? And so, for example, if you were an expert on VCRs, that was probably great for a few years, and then you have to eventually adapt to DVDs. So just keeping an eye on it. But I think if you have a very specific singular interest, there's definitely opportunities for you to focus your learning and become an expert in that area. So, and I think also note these overlap. You can be a generalist, but then also be considered an expert in a few areas. These are not like individual buckets. And so I think having the conversation with your supervisors to figure out, I want to become a leader, what area is potential for the company, and then kind of picking a path and, focusing on how do I get there and how do I be a leader in what I want to do. And so I kind of cover different skills or distinction for promotion, from learning to independence to then leadership, and kind of touched on some of the different promotion pathways here. So before turning it over to Sandy, I just wanted to walk quickly through my journey. And so I was hired at Roe in 2004. So I have been there for almost 18 years. And I went through kind of that learning, the independence, and the leadership stages. And when you look at it on paper, it looks pretty straightforward. What you don't see are all the twists and turns along the way. If an opportunity arose to learn something new, I said yes. I have done other roles, like I have been a site monitor. I have worked on tons of company-wide initiatives. And so I think, my recommendation would be, if you see someone in a position that interests you, talk to them, see how they got there, because I think reality oftentimes is very different than what you see on paper. And I would say don't be intimidated, because most people would probably be very happy to have that conversation on strategies to get to where you want to be in your career. All right, thank you. And I am going to stop sharing. And does that come back to you, Charlotte?
Yes, that does. Thank you so much, Heather. That was really interesting. And I really liked how you talked about those different promotion pathways. That's great. And also congratulations on being promoted to senior director. That's great.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. So the next speaker that we're going to hear from is Sandra Taylor. She is the Manager of Biostatistics at the Clinical and Translational Science Center at the University of California, Davis. So thank you so much, Sandy, and I'm going to stop sharing and you can share your slides.
All right, thank you. Okay, good. I was frozen there for a second. Yes, so I'm Sandy Taylor. I'm with UC Davis, and I manage the biostatistics program for the Clinical and Translational Science Center. And I think for this talk, significantly, is that I am staff. So I very much understand the perspectives of a staff statistician. There we So Heather did a really great job of talking about how one advances and the different skills and different pathways. And when she and I talked, we realized that those skills and pathways are very similar in industry and academia. So I'm not going to talk about the specific skills you need and how to advance, but rather I'm going to focus on specific strategies and approaches you can use to get an advancement, and really with primarily a focus on academia, since that I think is a little bit more difficult than the private sector. I think one of the things you first have to ask yourself is what constitutes advancement to you. And that can be a promotion, so getting to another classification level. It could be a salary increase, or it could be a formal title. Now, certainly all of these things can come together, but you can think about that there are opportunities to pluck one off and get that without the others. So you don't necessarily have to just get a promotion with a formal title and a salary all at once. Given, or once you've thought about what constitutes advancement to you or what you want to focus on, the question is, how do I do it at an academic institution? My first words of advice are document, document, document. Record everything you do, particularly if it illustrates how you are operating at a higher level. I tell my staff at the start of every review period, which starts May 1, start writing down what you do, because you are not going to remember it a year later. If you gave a talk, write it down. If you've got a publication, write it down. If you helped with a proposal, write it down. So you, in particular, you want to keep track of tasks or projects that you led. So you don't have to lead the whole project. If you just did one little task that you were responsible for, keep track of that. Keep track of junior staff or graduate students that you mentored or directed. Certainly papers, proposals, seminars, workshops, all those very tangible things. But some of the other less tangible things are repeat clients. Do you have a client that comes back to you all the time, and they come back to you because you do good work and you deliver? That's important information to have. Or you get a little, thanks for all your hard work on this. Keep that, put that in your file. Outside of just the statistical project work, you may also do some other things to help your unit, such as improving a processes or having new initiatives and programs. So any of those types of things, document it, note what the outcomes are, and start to really build this portfolio of the things that you've brought to the organization. So once you get this, the question is, how can I actually get promoted? One theme you'll see through this is find a champion, or two or three. You need people with influence who support you in this. Certainly start off with your supervisor. If your supervisor is not on board, it's probably not going to happen. So you have to have their endorsement, but don't necessarily stop there. You can go to your department chair. My department chair was very influential in pushing through one of my promotions. So there's another person to connect with. The chief administrative officer can also be very helpful. Your HR person, your HR connection. So don't think you just have to go through your supervisor. Do engage them, have them on board, but reach out to other folks as well who can help you. Then write a job description that reflects what you are currently doing. I know my job description, my official job description, is about 8 years old now, 10 years old. And what I am actually doing doesn't really look like what's on that position description anymore. So the guidance, what was suggested to me is write down what you are doing, and we can use that as support for a promotion. My new job description that I'm working on is probably about 3 pages long, just because I wrote down everything. So be as detailed and specific as possible. You can trim it later. And when you have that, then going back to the first slide, document what you're doing and document how and showing how you are operating beyond your current position. The other thing that's really important, and I mean, it's definitely something that comes up in academia. It certainly comes up in industry as well, is know the playing field. Okay. Who else is in your job classification in your department? Who is at the next level? How does your experience, including education, compare to those in your level and above your level? And then how does your work compare to those in and above your classification in terms of complexity, leadership, responsibility, etc.? If you kind of do this assessment and you say, well, actually, everybody in my job classification, we're all doing about the same thing, and you probably don't have a whole lot to go on to support a promotion. But if you're looking at folks who are in the next level and you're going, wait a minute here, I'm doing everything they're doing, then you've got a basis to say, you know, I need to be at the next higher level. Strategies and approaches and options. So this is where sometimes you might have to get a little creative. Obviously, the most straightforward approach is to just ask for a promotion. Once you've got your documentation, you've perhaps revised your position description, you understand where you are relative to your colleagues, go to your supervisor and say, lay it out. Say, look, I think I deserve a promotion. If they kind of hem and haw, ask for specifics. You know, okay, you're telling me I'm not ready for it. What am I lacking? What specifically do I need to do? And then ask them to help you do that. So, for example, one of my staff has expressed interest in moving to the next higher level, and I said, look, you got to be able to prepare grants. If this is something that you want to do, let me know, and I will start engaging you in that and helping you develop that skill set. So ask what specific is needed, and then ask for help. How do I get that? Be persistent, okay, but don't be a pain. So I'd say particularly if you're dealing with a faculty supervisor, they are super duper busy. They've got 1,000 demands on them. And, you know, I hate to say it, but you might not be the most pressing task they have to address. So you may have to continue to come back and say, hey, where are we on this? How can I help you move this forward? Just keep, it can be valuable to keep on their mind. If that doesn't work, or in addition to that, you can apply for a position at the next higher level. So if your organization is advertising for somebody at a next higher level, apply for it. You should certainly let folks know that you're going to apply for it, but that's one way to move up. And I will tell you that it's actually a strategy that we use when we want to promote staff, because we have found it more difficult to actually reclassify somebody at a higher level than to open a new position and hire them into it. So that can be a route for managers to take, particularly in academic settings, as a way to promote staff. A little bit more risky, actually a lot more risky, and not necessarily one that I would recommend, but an avenue would be to look at other departments within your institution. And if there are positions open in another department at a higher level, you can apply for those. You may, that comes with risks. You either have to want to do it, or you have to be prepared to turn it down and leverage that to get an advancement in your own department. I think this is something that's much more common for administrative staff and managerial staff, non-technical staff. It's pretty common within academia that people bounce around departments and they are able to advance by moving departments. But so it's an option. It's not necessarily a great option. You may have options as adjunct faculty. This was an avenue that I was offered, where I could have moved into an adjunct faculty position, and that was another way to advance. There are a lot of strings attached to that. It may sound like that's a super option if it's available to you. It was ultimately something that I did not do because there are, in my opinion, a lot of strings attached to that I didn't want. Regardless of the position, the pathway or strategy that you might use here, having an advocate is essential. If you've got to have somebody going in for you and requesting the promotion or advertising for a new recruitment. So it's usually not something you can do on your own, but you can provide all the documentation that will help that person make those moves. So I mentioned that advancement can consist of salary, a promotion, or a title. There are ways to get salary increases without a concomitant promotion. One way is through what I'm calling a within-class increase in responsibility. So if you have taken on greater responsibility within your role, you may be able to petition HR to get additional pay to support those additional responsibilities. I'm working on this with one of my staff right now. And what we need to do was, again, go back to the ever popular job description and modify that to include these additional responsibilities. And now we're going to HR to see if they will allow us to give him a salary adjustment to support that. There are other equity program options at UC Davis. It's called equity. It may be called something else at your institution. We can petition HR for a salary adjustment for folks who we consider to be in a critical role to retain and difficult to recruit. And I would argue that just about every biostatistician falls within this category. We've had a devil of a time recruiting folks, and they're critical to retain the ones that we have. So you need to get somebody to make this argument for you, but it is one potential route. You may also be able to get an adjustment if your salary lags relative to other similarly experienced and qualified staff. So recall that I said, take a look at the playing field. This helps with this. If you are paid less than others and you're doing the same job, then you can argue that you should get an adjustment. Incidentally, at least at the UC system, and I suspect other public institutions, all salaries can be found on a searchable database. So you can go in and actually find out what your colleagues are making and use that information to then put yourself in relative to everybody else in your classification. Do understand your institution's equity programs and timelines. So some of our equity programs only happen at certain times of the year. Others of them are rolling and we can ask at any time. And know what you need to do to support those. So this is a conversation with your HR person, or have your supervisor have that conversation with your HR person. And again, having an advocate is essential. You're usually not going to be the one who's in the position to petition for these things, but you can provide the suggestions of avenues and the documentation that allow your supervisor or manager to make those appeals. And then real quick, I think I've used just about every route I talked about in my journey. I was hired as a pretty low-level statistician because that's what they had open in 2010. But a year later, I moved to senior statistician, and the route that we took for that was to open a position and hire me into it. In 2014, I discussed promotion to principal statistician, and it took about at least a year to make that happen because of some odd wording in the requirements for the job that they had to figure out a way around. That at that point was the highest classification we had in the statistician track. And so I wondered, where's there to go after this? So I again went back to my supervisor and said, what are my options here? At which point the only option I was given was to move into an adjunct professor position. And I pursued that and almost finalized that. I was a signature away from what I'm told. And we had a new career tracks system put into place UC-wide. And I was given an option to be reclassified. Well, I was reclassified as what's called a programmer 4. And I said, okay, I think I like that. So I decided to stay staff as a programmer 4. And interestingly, one of the reasons why I thought that there's a number of reasons why that was good, but one thing that appealed to me is that there was a programmer 5, and I thought, okay, great. You know, I've got another place I can move. This remains complicated and slow for this to happen. I do have folks working on it, but it's not going to be easy. And which brings me to my last point again, having an advocate is essential. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. It's a really interesting presentation as well. And I like that you kept saying having an advocate is essential, because I think that's a really key point. Awesome. Okay, so we are now going to go into our panel discussion and Q&A. So please submit any questions into the chat, and we can get those answered. So I have a few questions that we can kind of start off with. I am going to, however, unshare, and then we're going to pin 2 speakers. Okay, so do either of you, I guess Sandra also kind of talked about this, but what has been kind of your way of figuring out if you have topped out at your current company, university, in the possibility of being promoted? What have you done to kind of see about what is the option? How do you kind of start having those conversations? Does it start with your manager? Does it start with going to HR? Does it start with just kind of looking at the possible kind of promotional roles throughout just general biostatisticians?
So I can go first. I have always done it with my manager. And when I was promoted to a senior biostatistician 3, this is before sort of our company restructured, but I was pretty much said, we're promoting you, don't expect another promotion. I mean, that is what I was told. And I was 31 at the time, and I'm like, great, okay. And so I think sometimes that was my reality. And then we reorganized. I think that I probably could have lobbied to say, hey, look, here's what other positions are common in the industry. Can we consider making this a reality here at our company? And that's where we are now. But I think there would have had to be some legwork done of finding out what's common in the industry, me talking to other companies, seeing where I might fit at other companies, and then bringing that information back to mine.
This has been a challenge for me because I topped out at the first job tracks that I was in. I'm technically not topped out of my current job track, but the higher levels in my job track are termed enterprise level positions, which are not to be hired at the department level. So that's where my advocates are trying to figure out if they can move me up, but keep me as a department employee. After that, I have no idea. Those are conversations I have with my supervisor boss, but I don't think he knows. I'm forging it. There is nobody in my role. I am creating it every day, which is wonderful and terrible all at the same time.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much both for those comments. I think it's a lot to kind of also hear too, that you sometimes are told that it's the end of the road, but that it's also, you know, figuring out how to kind of move forward. And I like the advice, Sandra, that it's you're figuring it out each day, and sometimes that's great, but then sometimes that's pretty bad too. So Joni, I saw your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question? Speaking wise, I also see questions coming into the chat as well, but you're welcome to ask a question.
Yeah, sure. These actually were 2 questions for Sandra. Sandra, this is Joni from UCI.
Yep.
You mentioned that you had the opportunity to do the adjunct faculty position and chose not to because of the strings attached to it. And I'm currently kind of in discussions about affiliate position with a particular school here. And so I kind of wanted just to pick your brain a little bit about why you chose not to go that route. I know another opportunity came up with the career track stuff, but I just kind of wanted to know if you felt comfortable sharing some of the other concerns you had about shifting into that.
Yeah.
And then 2, the second question was just about like where you are in the process for moving to that programmer 5, and like what have been the hiccups that have delayed that? Because I know obviously being in another UC, I recognize the slowness of all of that. And so I'm just trying to think ahead for some of my own staff about ways of navigating that system to speed up the process. So
yeah, so I'm going to address that one first. What has to happen is I need my boss and department chair to go to bat, to go to HR and say, Sandy is working an enterprise level position, because I am. But we can hire, but it's okay if she lives in public health sciences. And so the holdup there is that my bosses are faculty and extremely busy and teaching and all that kind of hoo-ha, and they just haven't made it a priority. So that's the holdup there as far as I know. Now, why I didn't pursue the faculty. You have teaching, so you're going to have teaching responsibilities. So I was looking at continuing to do everything I was doing, plus adding teaching responsibilities, plus adding service responsibilities. And as an adjunct here, I would have had to get 90% of my funding. There was no hard money. There's a 10% hard money, which in hindsight is not a big deal, but terrified me at the time that I might not eat if I didn't get enough funding. And I didn't want to have the pressure of constantly having to wonder where my next job was coming from. A couple other reasons were that one of my tenured faculty colleagues, she and I were chatting. I was saying, hey, I don't want to do it because I want to go play with my dogs and go backpacking and hiking. And she says, oh, you get used to working overtime. And I really didn't want to get used to working overtime. And another one of my faculty colleagues said, well, you start to make decisions based upon what you need for your merit review. And I also did not want to make decisions based on what I needed for my merit review. I wanted to make decisions based upon what I wanted to do and what I felt was in the best interest of the institution, not what necessarily what was going to look best on my CV. And so everything kind of coalesced together. And with the programmer 4 position, the salary levels were considerably higher than what I had in the principal statistician track. So there wasn't a strong motivation for me to move into the faculty position.
Thank you for that.
Great, thanks, Johnny, and thanks, Sandra. This is great. We're seeing a lot of kind of questions come into the chat, and so I'm just going to go in kind of the order that they came in. But if we end up kind of ending the end of our time for this panel discussion, just know that you'll be able to go into the breakout rooms and ask the panelists those questions as well. So the first question I have for both of you is, can any of the panelists speak to how the GSAT or PSTAT credentials have impacted their own or someone else's career trajectory?
I don't know what GSAT and PSAT are.
Okay, good. So the GSAT and the PSAT are specific statistician credentials that you can go through the American Statistical Association. And so that's kind of an answer right there too. So I haven't known anybody that's kind of gotten them, but do any of you have any thoughts on how that kind of helped somebody's career trajectory? No. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Somebody recommended, my department chair suggested it at one point. I'm like, what's the point? I have a job.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Can any of the speakers talk about how you will balance the research activities versus statistician duty while conducting additional research projects help with your career development?
Is this methodological research?
Let's see. Ray, can you kind of clarify what kind of specific you're talking about for your research activities?
Yeah, so it's more like additional research activities, like just running a project, or probably just more methodology-wise activities. Because I am a PhD student, and I'm also thinking about, I either gonna go to a research track or just go to like a pure statistician track, which gonna be most likely gonna work with people doing their projects. So my question is really trying to figure out, which one actually gonna be helpful, like doing additional research. Do you think gonna be really helpful for the additional career development? Because I believe, more duties, more activities probably gonna take more time. So I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how to balance it sometimes.
If you're, well, okay, so if you want to be a collaborative biostatistician, either in an academic setting or in industry, I think you would do better by building up your collaborative work resume relative to research. When I'm reviewing resumes, I look at, have you worked with a non-statistician? Or have you just done research? Folks who have a lot of methodological work, but don't have applied experience, they don't bubble up as high on my ranking when I'm looking at candidates. So if you want to be in an applied collaborative setting, beef up your applied collaborative piece. Heather, you probably have a similar, but I'll let you.
I would say similar, but everything we do is collaborative. Like that's just the space I'm in.
Yeah.
So the next question that we have is asking about, do you have any suggestions about how and where you can find salary information for people at your institution or similar institutions to yours?
I just Google University of California salary.
Yeah.
So I'm in industry, so all of our salaries are private. Truthfully, talking to recruiters. And I don't know if that's something in the academic setting, but you can talk to a recruiter and find out quite a bit of information, at least on the industry side.
Great. The next question is, we often run into difficulty convincing our HR that our salaries are lower than comparable positions at other universities. Is there a resource where you can find job titles, descriptions, and salaries that we can reference?
I know our HR group gets reports that have ranges for other companies in the industry. They're not always perfect, but at least we have used that as argument to give internally individuals salary adjustments. So that is something we have used with HR to justify adjustments. We also try to make sure they get, when people leave, what salaries are they getting, just to kind of understand the competitive landscape a little more.
I'm not in that world, so I don't know. Somebody did post that there are the ASA salaries.
Yes.
And again, if you're looking at a particular university system or other university systems, you can go on to UC Davis and pull down a job and see what their see what their salary range is. It's a little bit difficult. It is challenging in that it's not standard of what statisticians are called, and we're thrown, you'd never find us, we're considered, but we're bioinformatics programmers. So you're not going to find a statistician title code.
Okay, great, thank you. So any thoughts about how to frame a promotion as a benefit to the company or institution as opposed to just an additional cost?
Oh, absolutely. It's like, yeah, I mean, if you have the skills and if you're able to lead programs, then there are, or, write proposals, then that's more, it's a greater volume, higher quality research that's going to be going out the door. Greater opportunity for grant funding to come in. And seriously, one of our bottlenecks is we don't have enough bodies to put on grant writing. So if we can get more people skilled at higher levels, that helps the institution because it helps support our research enterprise. It helps bring in more money to the university.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's all about showing your benefit and getting the departments, the university to understand that they really do need collaborative biostatisticians. They're a very important role. And I think even at the companies too, where I've worked at before. So let's see. Let's go into, okay, so this is a good question. Do you have any recommendations to negotiate funding support for workshops, training, conferences, or continuation for learning and promotion? Because I've seen sometimes as like staff statisticians, we're not given as much professional development funds as faculties and kind of other tenure track people.
So I can start, and I'm sure it's slightly different from the academic setting, but for us, saying, hey, I'd like to go to this is an idea I'd like to present, because then you are marketing the company and you're getting our name out there so that it might, going back to that business development, it could lead to other opportunities for networking and everything. So sharing content, but we have also asked individuals to bring content back and use that as a learning venue. So what you learn at the conference, you have to bring back and present to the other statisticians. So then it's a learning development for other people and showing the benefit in that perspective too. And I think if there's a workshop that is very specifically tied to work that's important that you're doing, and that there's maybe a learning gap within your company, that's something to market.
Yeah, probably the strongest argument is if there's a particular skill set that we're either lacking as a unit or we only have one. then it's a pretty easy sell to say, we need more than one person who can do this because that one person is overloaded. So it's the argument comes from what are the essential looking at what your work needs are, and do you have the skills to meet those needs? If you're sending clients to other places because you don't have the skills, I think that's an easy sell to get somebody training in that area.
Great, thank you. So something for Heather in kind of talking at the more industry level, is there any concern with employers about if and when you talk to recruiters?
In general, I don't think it gets back, but keep in mind it is a small industry and sometimes people talk to other people. For me personally, I will sometimes talk to a recruiter because I think it's useful for me to know as a manager what is going on with the industry, because again, I can just learn information. So I don't think there's a downside. I think the other benefit that comes from essentially kind of just talking with a recruiter, you understand the job skills that other companies are looking for to make sure you are staying marketable. It's always, I mean, there may be times when you want to leave a company because you're no longer happy there, and making sure that you're building up the skills for both promotion within your company, but at other institutions, I think is also important to kind of keep your eye on what's needed elsewhere.
Great, thank you. Let's see. There's a couple ones that are talking about needing experience with grant writing. If you're an MS statistician or a PhD level, and people are kind of saying, is there an expectation at a certain point that in order to be promoted and have a PhD to have grant writing experience?
This is one I've actually been thinking about recently because I've got a MS level statistician who wants to get some grant writing experience. And I'm wondering if there is if he's going to be able to advance in this way. And I have every confidence that he can write effective and successful grants and lead those down the road. I mean, he's still got some years of experience to gain. What I don't know and where I get concerned is I'm not sure he can be a co-investigator, and that could be a problem down the road. And it's still something I'm navigating.
And I will say we do, our company does a bunch of like research with the NIH. So we write quite a few grants. So I have written grants, but I have always been paired with like the PI. Since I don't have my PhD, I can't be named on a grant. And so I think it depends on who your grants and you're working with, and whether at a master's level, that is something that is important. However, I will say within our group, it is important that even at a master's level that you can write grants if you want to get promoted and that's the area you're working on, to support the PhD individuals.
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking down the road is we in essence have a PhD figurehead, but let the named on the grant, but really the masters would be running it.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's very institution specific and asking.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have kind of satisfied those questions. Okay, so kind of the last question that we have, kind of going back to salary data. Has anyone campaigned their like institution or company to make salary data available if it isn't already? The person would like to hear kind of a compelling argument for this.
I have not had anyone I have not heard of anyone campaigning to make it public. I will say there's a lot of people in our company who all know what each other makes, but that is the individual personally sharing with others.
Gotcha. So maybe that needs to be in contact. You need maybe a more mentoring type role where you're kind of talking more about different salary levels to just get an idea of kind of where you are at a certain company potentially.
As a supervisor, I haven't talked salary ranges. It's more kind of peer to peer, them sharing,
Peer-to-peer,
or like when people leave a company, they'll sometimes share with previous people, but that's more kind of, I would say, friends sharing with friends.
Friends, yeah. Which makes sense. Okay. So let's go to this last question and then we'll head out to the breakout room. So the final question is, what are skills that are needed but not typically seen and for which we should train our students or learners to make them competitive, specifically within statisticians?
One of the greatest skills that if you're lacking it, it kind of dooms you. You got to be able to think like a scientist and be able to critically look at data and go, BMI of 10, that's probably not right. Too often I get MS level statisticians, they're like, well, that's what the number is. I need you to critically review and understand the data. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to have a general idea of what it is. If you don't know what a critical variable is, ask or Google it, find out and understand what the research question is and what you're trying to do. So that's my biggest pet peeve of what folks don't have that need to have to be successful in this space.
And I will just add, that's very important. And I would say the other big one for me is communication. Working on your communication, written, verbal, you are going to have to explain some really complex issues to non-statisticians. And being able to communicate that clearly is really important.
Great. And I also think an aspect of kind of communication too is asking good questions too, is kind of thinking about how to ask those questions to get that type of communication out of those different researchers as well, because sometimes that's the whole communication process, not only telling, but also asking as well.
Right.
So.
When you get a request, asking the question, why is this important? What is this driving? Can we understand your end goal? And that's really helpful to have that as a statistician to actually understand what is their end goal, because they may not be asking for what they need.
Right, exactly. Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for a great panel discussion. I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to wrap up and go into our breakout rooms. Okay. So I just want to acknowledge all the wonderful people that helped organize this webinar, also with thanking Heather and Sandra for their great advice. And so these are the list of all the people from the Pathways to Promotion Committee, and also thanking the ASA Statistical Consulting Section and Maggie as the chair. And so your feedback is really important. So we'll be sending out an email to you through the email that you signed up for the Zoom link about providing feedback about this webinar, and then also future webinars as well. And we just would like to also let you know that the Pathways to Promotion Committee has 2 JSM roundtables, the career development of staff statisticians in academic settings. And there's always room to negotiate, building negotiation skills for statisticians. So look for those 2 roundtables at JSM 2022 in DC this summer. And then also future webinars coming up about topics related for promotion for staff and faculty statisticians in academic and non-academic settings. And so now we are going to go into our breakout rooms. So breakout room 1 will have Heather, and she'll be kind of focusing on skills and industry. And then Sandra will be in breakout room number 2 for strategies and specifically talking about academia. And then I'll be in here in the main room and facilitating just kind of networking if you'd like to talk to other people that you see in this session as well. So thank you all for attending. We'll just be going into the breakout rooms and ending the webinar from there. We will not be recording the breakout rooms as well, but thank you all so much for attending, and we hope you stay on to kind of do a little bit more networking at the end of this hour. And please look for upcoming events for the Pathways to Promotion Committee. Thank you. And so just to kind of have everybody see, you should be able to go down into your breakout rooms, and you should be able to join a breakout room. And if you are having any trouble, please kind of message or raise your hand in the chat. But the breakout room should be on the bottom, whatever the screen is where you also have your mute and your stop video.